I'm Susan Hiles. I'm a master gardener, and when the First Lady asked me to do this garden, it was a blank slate. It was a beautiful, beautiful garden, but there was nothing in there. And she asked me to make it an heirloom garden that would have been contemporaneous with when the house was built in 1929, 1930. So I got together a team of master gardeners that I'd worked with before on another garden that we had done, and we just began from there. We knew that we wanted a three-season garden because Tennessee can sustain that. Tennessee can grow 3 seasons of vegetables, so we initially started with a 3-season plan. We have spring crops that we can start as early as March, early March. The cabbages, in fact, can go in February. Then as those begin to be taken out, we plant our summer crops that are the heat-loving crops, and then late we begin to plant the same kind of cool-loving crops in the fall. So we get 3 full seasons here, and of course many areas of the country can't do that. Generally, an heirloom means that it's old, of course, before World War II, but many of them are much, much, much older. It also means that it is open pollinated. Hybrids very often are sterile if you try to save the seeds.
I've never really had the opportunity to work in a kitchen where the garden is just right out back. That is just truly an honor, and it's just a chef's dream to have vegetables that are this fresh and this high quality to serve to people eating your food. Any typical day here at the residence will serve from 2 to 150 people, and groups will range from different legislators from all over the state to different businesses that we're trying to bring to Tennessee, which is a great thing. And you know, it is really any chef's dream to be able to go out to the garden and pick what we're going to serve and look for inspiration there.
Corn is one of the strangest pollinations in the plant kingdom, I think. It forms tassels, which are the flower-like things, grainy-looking things at the top, and that's where the pollen is. And as the ears form, everyone is familiar with the silks that's on the top of the corn. That is actually part of the female part of the plant. Every one of those silks is connected to a kernel of corn. And one of those grains of pollen that is made up in that tassel has to hit one of those silks, and that grain of pollen travels down to the kernel and fertilizes it so it'll fill out. So if you ever see a husk of corn and you husk that corn and see that it has some kernels that haven't filled out, that means that that particular silk didn't get a grain of pollen. That's why we have to plant corn in blocks, because it's wind pollinated and we want that pollen to get back and forth down on the kernels and not in long rows. That's why you see a lot of times in old farmsteads, you'll see the farmers walking down their fields of corn on a really still day, shaking those stalks to get those grains of pollen to fall down on the silks.
The star of the show this year, I feel like, was the spring lettuce. During the first parts of spring, we were able to harvest lettuce for about 3 weeks straight. And you know, typically whatever's coming out of the garden the best we like to serve. And that was really one of the highlights. Right now, we really just look to the garden, and we're cooking fresh green beans because we just got a ton of those in. And then we just simply serve them sauteed with a little brown butter and some fresh herbs like basil and parsley.
I remember one day when we had 140 children here, and they would come in groups of 20 to the garden. I needed to thin the carrots anyway, and so I would pull up a few carrots, and they would see these baby carrots come out of the ground, and some of them asked me, how did they get there? They'd never imagined that carrots actually came like that. That's just wonderful to me to see children begin to understand where their food comes from. And we talked about plant families and how certain vegetables are related to each other.
Not everybody has the recipes a chef has, but the key to really fresh and hearty food and healthy food is buying it fresh from the farmer's market or growing it yourself. Simple cooking techniques like blanching, sauteing, all these things are very accessible in today's cookbooks. So anybody at home can go to the bookstore and learn how to blanch. One of the best ways to cook green beans is simply blanching in salted boiling water and then adding to a little melted butter and seasoning with salt and pepper. So that's, you know, the trick to really good, healthy, fresh food is just getting it from a fresh source and learning how to cook it from its raw stage.
And don't forget that just because you don't have room for a garden or time to do one, well, to start with, anyone could have a small garden, but if you don't have the interest in doing that, go to the local farmers markets. There are lots and lots of people that are trying to make a living growing these vegetables and want you to have these fresh, homegrown vegetables that aren't sprayed with chemicals. The First Lady told you, I believe, that we don't use chemicals. This garden is organic. We don't use anything on them but water. The First Lady was really interested in having information that was more educational about the signs, and so I drew up some information on plant families, which vegetables are related, something about that plant family, what else is in it, some of the characteristics, whether it's a cool season or a warm season, where it likes to grow, and then also, here are the vegetables from that family that we are growing, and those are scattered throughout the garden, especially when we're having tours.
With each growing season, we're going to learn and see what's growing best, and obviously I'm going to be able to pay attention to our guests and see what they're loving, what they're not liking so much, and then we'll plan our planting seasons around that. Having a garden has really changed the way I look at menu design and menu preparation, because we just go back to the basics and simple cooking techniques and good wholesome flavors. No, there's not one favorite meal, but typically as long as I end the meal with chocolate, I'm usually pretty good.